For decades, the world accepted a chillingly simple story. Hitler died in his bunker, a concrete crypt buried beneath Berlin, where a dictator met his end as the Reich fell above him. But when Soviet forces finally stepped inside in 1945, they didn't just find the remnants of a defeated regime, they found something stranger. Something darker. This wasn't merely the scene of a suicide. It was the stage of a vanishing act. And the more investigators looked, the more questions emerged until nothing about Hitler's final days seemed certain anymore. Just behind the grand facade of the Reich Chancellery, beneath what is now a quiet patch of Berlin grass, sat one of the most psychologically disturbing locations in modern history, the Bunker. A subterranean fortress carved into the earth not merely to withstand bombs but to outlive a collapsing empire. Originally a modest air raid shelter, the structure was expanded and fortified in stages, becoming something far more than just protection. It was 8.5 meters underground, entombed in over 3 meters of reinforced concrete, not a refuge. A bunker built to seal off the end of a world. Inside, Hitler's quarters were tucked into the deepest part of the labyrinth. The upper floor contained small offices, a kitchen, and cramped staff rooms. In total 30 rooms, no decor, no softness. Just bare, cold walls, stripped of anything but purpose. As the Allies closed in, more concrete was poured, steel doors clammed shut. The bunker transformed into a claustrophobic tomb, a final stand against inevitability. It had its own power supply, air filters, plumbing, everything needed to outlast the war, except hope, but even that was calculated. Hitler's location wasn't random. He stayed close to the Chancellery, where the hollow shell of Nazi governance still issued orders. He clung to the illusion of control, barking out commands. While Soviet tanks rolled closer, above, Berlin crumbled. Streets turned to rubble, civilians starved. And yet, the bunker held quiet, suffocating, and meticulously hidden. Only Hitler's inner circle knew how to access it. No escape routes, no alternate exits, just one door, in and none out. Its very design said everything. This wasn't a shelter. This was where the story ended on Hitler's terms. By April 1945, that end had begun. Inside the bunker, silence reigned. Soviet forces surrounded the city. Hitler had retreated fully underground. On April 16th, he moved into the bunker permanently. Eva Braun joined him willingly. With them were Joseph Goebbels, Magda Goebbels, their 6 young children, and high-ranking staff including Martin Bormann and General Hans Krebs. Above ground, what remained of the Third Reich was in free fall. Every day, the ground shook. Shells rained from Soviet artillery. Communications failed. Updates from the front came slowly, riddled with error, or didn't come at all. Yet inside, a strange form of order persisted. Secretaries typed daily reports, meals were prepared, routines clung to. But beneath that surface was dread, quiet, contagious, and absolute. No one dared speak the truth, not to each other, and certainly not to Hitler. His health had deteriorated. Parkinsonian tremors racked his hands. His gait was hunched, slow. He looked decades older than 56. He held meetings in a narrow, airless room where he barked orders disconnected from reality. Generals who voiced doubt were silenced or dismissed. Hitler would not leave Berlin. He would not flee. And by making that choice, he ensured no one else would either. On April 22nd, the Goebbels family moved into the bunker permanently. Magda brought her children, pretending life continued as normal. But behind her motherly smiles, a plan was already forming, one that would end in horror. She had decided her children would not live in a world without Hitler. In those final days, Hitler began to prepare for death, not defeat, not capture, but absolute erasure. On April 29th, he married Eva Braun in a brief civil ceremony. The next day, both would be dead. The war was over, no rescue would come. The bunker was no longer a command center. It was a tomb. And what came next would change history. On May 2, 1945, Soviet troops reached the garden ruins of the Reich Chancellery. The Battle of Berlin was over. The bunker, long protected and hidden, was now exposed. What they found below ground would become one of the most heavily classified investigations of the war. The lower levels were flooded and places pipes had burst from the bombing above. Furniture was overturned. Papers were strewn across floors. The air was foul, damp, and electric. With the weight of what had just happened, there were no survivors. Only silence, debris, and the sense that something terrible had occurred here, but not in panic. In control, Soviet intelligence immediately took over. Teams combed each room. Blood stains were noted on walls and floors. Shell casings were collected. Furniture marked by impact, personal items retrieved. Every object was logged or burned. Some documents were preserved, others disappeared forever. Photographs were taken of key rooms, especially Hitler's office, where a large, dark stain marked the right side of a couch. More blood was found on the wall behind it. This, Soviet officers believed, was the exact location where Hitler had shot himself, but the Soviets weren't interested in confirming Hitler's death for the world. Quite the opposite. Stalin ordered silence. Reports were classified. Foreign intelligence agencies, British, American, even Soviet allies, were told nothing. For a time, even the location of Hitler's remains was a mystery, but the Soviets had already found the bodies. Just days after Berlin's fall, Soviet patrols began scouring the garden behind the Chancellery. The chaos of war had left the area cratered and scorched. But buried within a shallow, blackened shell hole near a charred wooden structure, they found something deeply unsettling: two partially burned corpses. One male, one female, both badly damaged by fire and fragmentation, as if someone had tried very hard to erase them, yet even in death, details remained. Among the scorched bones, Soviet examiners retrieved a lower jawbone and a fragment of a dental bridge, small, metallic clues that would ultimately become central to solving one of the most important forensic puzzles of the 20th century. The bodies were hastily examined, then quickly removed for analysis. Though they were unrecognizable, the Soviets suspected what they'd found. But suspicion wasn't enough. Proof was needed, and secrecy was paramount. While Stalin told the world nothing, Soviet counterintelligence quietly tracked down surviving bunker staff. Dental assistants Kia Heusermann and Fritz Echtmann had both worked under Hitler's personal dentist, Dr. Hugo Blaschke. When shown the recovered dental fragments, Heusermann didn't hesitate. She recognized the metal bridge work instantly. Her detailed memory of Hitler's unique dental structure matched the remains precisely. It was him. The Soviets had confirmed it, but they wouldn't share it. Instead, Stalin encouraged rumors. In press briefings, he implied that Hitler might have escaped, fled to Spain, or disappeared into the Alps. It was deliberate. Psychological warfare against the West. Confusion was a weapon now. And it worked. For the rest of the world, silence gave birth to doubt. Even though the second body was almost certainly Eva Braun, identified by elimination and confirmed by eyewitnesses, the absence of official photographs, documents, or public statements created a dangerous vacuum. Soon, the theories began. One of the most immediate was the idea of escape. That Hitler had slipped away through secret tunnels or fled by submarine to Argentina. Eyewitness reports, unverified and often absurd, popped up from South America to the Arctic. Some claimed to see a man matching Hitler's appearance hiding in the Andes, others in a secluded Bavarian farmhouse. The US FBI received so many reports that they opened entire case files, chasing rumors well into the 1950s. None led to anything concrete. But the world wanted to believe he had gotten away because that possibility was far more terrifying than his death. Another theory took hold: the double. According to some, Hitler had used a body double to fake his death, allowing the real dictator To flee unnoticed, the Soviets, having refused to release photos or allow Western officials access to the corpse, only fueled this idea. Burned bodies, no trial, no final images, no moment of reckoning. The conditions were perfect for doubt to grow into full-blown conspiracy. To make matters worse, even the Soviet autopsy results were muddled. Some documents suggested cyanide poisoning, others cited a bullet to the head. Western analysts who later gained partial access to the records were baffled by inconsistencies. How had Hitler really died? Poison? Gunshot? Both. The lack of clarity kept the door wide open. Books followed, radio specials, documentaries, speculative historians. Entire generations came to question whether the truth had been buried along with the bodies. And all the while, the evidence lay silent in Soviet archives, untouched and unseen, but eventually more pieces emerged. And what they revealed wasn't just confirmation. It was far worse. Inside Hitler's private quarters, investigators uncovered a chilling trail of physical evidence: a blood-stained couch, dried stains on the wallpaper behind it, a small table holding broken cyanide capsules. Other glass vials were found in Eva Braun's possessions. Some still contained traces of the chemical. One unopened capsule was sewn into the lining of a uniform, perhaps a backup plan that went unused. In a nearby drawer, a scorched metal container was labeled with a single word: gift gas, poison gas. It hadn't been deployed, but its presence was ominous. Was it intended for Hitler? For mass suicide? For the children? No one knew. But the message was unmistakable. Death had been part of the plan from the beginning. Everywhere in the bunker, the destruction was deliberate. Files had been burned, maps half charred, official documents reduced to ash, but in one fire-damaged cabinet, Soviet soldiers found carbon. Copies of Hitler's political will and personal testament signed just hours before his death. He left no apology, no admission of guilt, only blame. He accused his enemies, named successors. Then he erased himself from history, but not all could be hidden. Outside the bunker, another trench gave up more blackened bones, small ones, fragments of melted clothing, a brooch, a child's shoe. These were the remains of the Goebbels children. All 6 had been poisoned by their own mother, Magda, as part of an unthinkable pact with death. She and Joseph Goebbels had then taken their own lives by poison and bullet. Their bodies were burned, but not completely. They were found, barely intact, among the ash and metal. Even seasoned soldiers had to look away. The act wasn't done in panic. It wasn't desperation. It was ritual, an ideological suicide pact. A final offering to a cause that was already dead, and perhaps that was the most disturbing truth of all. To those who later studied the site, not just soldiers, but forensic scientists, psychologists, and historians, what the Soviets found inside Hitler's bunker was more than a collection of clues. It was a warning, a blueprint for vanishing without justice. The stains on the couch, the shattered cyanide capsules, the charred fragments of political documents, the methodical destruction of evidence, all of it pointed to one thing: this wasn't chaos, it was control. Hitler had choreographed his end. He didn't want a trial, didn't want the world to hear him confess. He wanted silence. He left behind no reckoning, no apology. Only death, and the silence worked. It allowed lies to grow. In the absence of a trial, survivors of his regime escaped. Some vanished into other countries, others quietly integrated back into society. Families of victims received no answers, no justice, no truth, and the longer the truth was buried literally and figuratively, the louder the myths became. Even more haunting was what investigators found in the Goebbels' final act. Magda Goebbels had not killed her children out of fear. She did it out of belief. In her eyes, a world without Hitler was a world unworthy of her children. She didn't hesitate. She gave them poison. then smiled as she joined them in death. For psychologists, the case remains one of the most extreme examples of ideological fanaticism ever documented. This wasn't just loyalty, it was religious. The forensic evidence confirmed every terrifying detail: melted fabric, shallow graves, charred bones, cyanide glassware, and one brooch so badly burned it fused with the child's remains. No one escaped judgment, except the ones who should have faced it most directly. That's what made the fur bunker so dangerous, what it symbolized, not just what it concealed. The end of Hitler was not marked by capture or trial. It was a controlled vanishing, and history has proven how seductive that strategy can be. Other dictators watched, other war criminals took notes. When facing defeat, many followed the same script: destroy the evidence, burn the files, take your own life before the world catches you. Dictators learned they could avoid justice not with escape but with silence, and that legacy may be the most chilling one of all. After the war, the Soviets took full control of the bunker site. But instead of preserving it for historical study, they chose another path: erasure. The entrance was sealed, the ruins cleared. Over the next decade, efforts intensified to wipe the place off the map. Explosives were used to collapse certain sections, records were scrubbed. The location was removed from official documents. It wasn't just about hiding a crime scene, it was about making sure the place could never become a shrine. In East Germany, the bunker was treated like radioactive material, dangerous, symbolic, and best forgotten. In the 1980s, more destruction followed. Concrete was shattered, soil dumped. Yet, ironically, the bunker's reinforced design made it impossible to fully demolish. Pieces of it remained buried just meters beneath the surface. When Germany reunified in 1990, the government faced a dilemma. Should the bunker be excavated and studied, or left buried and unspoken? In the end, silence won again. No memorial was built, no museum claimed the site. For decades, there were no signs, no plaques, no mention. By the early 2000s, residential apartments stood over the remains. A parking lot paved across part of it. It wasn't until 2006 that Berlin, under pressure from historians and the public, quietly installed a small, nondescript information board. Near the site, it sits beside an apartment building. Tourists who find it often don't realize what lies below their feet. There's no fence, no gate, just a brief paragraph and a map. A whisper in the place where the Nazi regime went silent forever, but that silence still echoes. The deliberate burial of the fur bunker was an attempt to suppress memory, to control how history is told, but it didn't stop the questions. In fact, it may have made them louder. The absence of answers became fertile ground for denial, distortion, and conspiracy. The more hidden the truth became, the more power it gave to myth. And so, the bunker's legacy is not just historical, it's psychological. It forces us to ask, how do we remember atrocity? Do we expose it, or do we cover it up in concrete and forget? In Hitler's case, the attempt to vanish left a hole in the story, one that conspiracies rushed to fill. But the facts are there. Even if burned and buried, he died beneath Berlin. His empire crumbled above him, and he chose to leave the world in silence, dragging his most loyal followers with him. The fur bunker was not a place of escape, it was a stage, a final performance. One that continues to haunt us not because of what was seen, but because of what was hidden. And in the end, that's the most terrifying truth of all. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.